And I get to start whenever.
Okay. Well, welcome on in, everybody, here to the Auburn Undercover podcast, Auburn Undercover YouTube channel. Nathan King with Jason Caldwell here outside of Auburn's football facility after Hugh Freeze's Monday press conference. And Jason, we knew this was going to be one that was full of a bunch of questions after Auburn's offensive performance in the 21-14 loss to Cal. Those questions ultimately boiled down to what is Auburn going to do at quarterback after Peyton Thorne threw 4 interceptions. Hugh Freeze said today it took him a while to land on it, I think, but not against the idea, but they do want to see how this week goes for him and Hank Brown.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect.
Sure.
I did not think we would see full bore one way or another, so this is probably about where I would have landed too, if you'd have asked me to pin it down. Hey, he admitted it wasn't good enough. Got to be better than that. But Peyton Thorne has been the guy that's been the best guy in practice each and every week. There hasn't really been a question of that for them. But at some point, games have to matter. And so it's kind of like, okay, that little give and take. We'll see how much Hank Brown gets involved. Honestly, only part we'll see is what little part we're at practice on Tuesday.
Yep.
I would guess that come Saturday, we'll see both of those guys potentially early on in the game. I think there comes a point where you have to see what it looks like for Hank Brown with the #1 offense, running with those guys, and see how that differs. Now, may not get to tell a bunch of that against a New Mexico team that defensively probably not as good as they are offensively, but I think it's worth noting that they're at least looking at the possibility of Hank Brown getting in there.
No, and I think it's, there's two sides of the coin of facing New Mexico now. Number one, you're glad that it's a little bit of a soft landing spot. At the same time, would there be a little bit more sense of urgency? Because I think a lot of Auburn fans latched on to Hugh Freeze saying today, if that continues from Thorne, they need to go in a different direction. I think a lot of people latched onto that, said, well, Saturday against Cal needs to be an example of it continued, doesn't need to happen anymore. So they'll, we'll see what they do with that this week. Like Jason said, Tuesday's practice, that'll be the first one of the week. So will they start to implement things that early? Not entirely sure. Of course, it was, it was more than just Peyton. I mean, we talked about that after the game on Saturday. The offensive line obviously had some issues, but one thing I kind of thought about, Jason, was what Freeze said. It sounds like the game plan, he said the coaches maybe threw too much at them, maybe had them carry too much, were his words, and there were a lot of plays that he thought normally would be executed well, but maybe there was just too much going on. You'll see maybe a more simplified game plan against New Mexico and potentially moving forward after that.
Yeah, maybe not as many options at the line of scrimmage. Maybe that's some of what we're talking about here, and maybe that's a little quarterback, maybe it's a little bit of wide receiver, maybe it's a little bit of offensive line. And we talked about it, how it felt like they were much further along, but the difference in being further along in practice and in execution, and the difference in being further along when you get a defense on the other side that can dictate what you're doing, that's two totally different things. And I think we saw some of that, and Kevin Steele used to call it paralysis by analysis. and defensively, we've seen that more. And we see it now from DJ Durkin. It's pretty simple. They don't do a ton of things, but you do it well. And I think it's it's worth looking at, especially offensively, going, look, let's cut down what we're doing, try to let guys play loose and fast and execute what you're doing, and let talent take over a little bit. And maybe that's some of it, but again, it all boils down to decision making, delivering the football. And Hugh Freeze came back to it several times, going, look, it wasn't good enough at the quarterback position. And right now, as we're shooting this, there's probably still a discussion going on inside as they prepare for our Monday practice. And I don't know. I honestly, I think it's going to be a very intriguing week and a very intriguing Saturday
for sure
when we watch that team roll out.
Yeah, maybe a little bit extra intrigue than we thought they would have carrying into this Week 3 game. Yeah, Hugh Freeze said that going after this press conference, he said he had individual meetings set up with both Peyton Thorne and Hank Brown. Thorne, obviously, you're continuing to evaluate what happened on Saturday, and Hank Brown, probably a case of, hey, let's brief you on maybe what we expect in practice this week, because things obviously have a good chance of looking a good bit different. Speaking of looking different, Jason, that offensive line, they had some late preseason changes. It looks like they will continue to change. An injury and maybe a poor performance at tackle against Cal are going to continue to cause that group to change and maybe look a lot different this weekend.
This is exactly why in camp we would see different rotations and guys playing different positions. It's exactly for this very scenario where Too Tall Miller's banged up. Doesn't look like he'll be playing this weekend with a hip injury. Not season ending, which is a good news, but it's the reason why you make these moves, to prepare for opportunities like this. So I would expect to see Dylan Wade at tackle a good bit Saturday. Maybe Tyler Johnson stays on that side. It sounds like Percy Lewis has played well, and they said he had his best game. We've seen him at right tackle as recently as a couple weeks ago in practice. I think it's going to be easier for him to slide to right tackle along with Ronan Chambers. That gives you 2 guys at each spot, and then you'll have a change of guard. Tate Johnson, we've seen, he's played a bunch of football. Braden Joyner is a guy that they've trusted and has continued to grow. Looks like it'll be those 2 guys at left guard. You know, we've still got Jeremiah Wright at right guard, Connor Lew at center. But this is why you rotate and do as much as you do in the preseason to prepare for moments like this.
Yeah, and one thing Hugh Freeze noted on that point is, he said, look, Peyton's more mobile. That's something you have to consider when you're maybe weighing the potential of Hank Brown getting an opportunity in there. But the question becomes, does he have other qualities that can show up in a game that will, you know, offset potentially the upside of a guy like Hank Brown? The other injury to note is Cam Coleman. We'll see if he's able to go on Saturday, or if Auburn wants him to go, if they want to push him against a team like New Mexico. He sustained kind of a stinger on that penultimate drive of the game. Obviously wasn't able to go up for that interception. Jason, we talked about it a minute ago, but we'll kind of close out here. And New Mexico, we'll get more into them this week. This is a team that I think performed maybe a little bit better than expected in their first 2 games of the season. Coming off a bye, if I'm not mistaken. I believe they've only played 2 games. They played with Arizona, number 20 team in the country, on the road for about 3 quarters. It was pretty close. And so this game, all of a sudden, I'm not saying Auburn's, this game is going to be particularly close, but all of a sudden, because of what you're going to be looking at on offense, and this isn't necessarily a pushover team either, this is an intriguing game they've got coming up on Saturday. It
is. I mean, they can score. Quarterback's very athletic. He can run. They can do some things there defensively. I wouldn't say it's the best group, especially up front. So I think you look, and there was one of the keys. I've written about it. Hugh Freeze mentioned it again this week, is staying out of 3rd and long situations. You run the football enough to do that, avoid some penalties. But he said, look, at some point you have to be able, in any offense, but especially in this offense, to take advantage of your numbers. And we saw it. They ran the ball off the goal line a couple times. You get a first down, and you get a one-on-one situation. Hugh Freeze said, look, those are big play opportunities. You get an interception, another interception on a poor throw, some decision making. Like, you can't just expect to go, we're just going to run the ball 65 times and win. You've got to be able to make plays in the passing game with these wide receivers, but you got to be able to execute it. And you can't give up a sack. You can't throw interceptions. I mean, there's a lot of can'ts that come out of last week. And you got a lot of things to clean up before Saturday. Yeah, I
mean, the system in particular was something I was interested to hear from Freeze today. I thought he gave a good answer as well on, the RPO stuff. Asked about Peyton Thorne, basically said, no, it hasn't been good enough. His execution in a game setting has not been good enough because, like you said, Peyton talked about it after the game, those one-on-ones are supposed to be open. But because of the other issues they've had, those plays have not necessarily been, we heard in preseason, they're actually 75-25 balls. We haven't necessarily seen that yet.
Yeah, and some of those too, like when they're one-on-one situations, you got to give your guy a chance.
Right, it's got to be a good throw.
And Saturday, there weren't enough of those that were chances. We saw an underthrown ball that led to an interception. We saw one thrown out of bounds. If you're there one-on-one opportunities, you got to give your 6'4" guy a chance to go catch the ball, and that's some of that too. But there were guys open. Hugh Freeze mentioned, hey, we had several plays where there were guys open that we didn't make the correct read. Those are things that can happen with a veteran quarterback. That's where this week practice is important. What you're seeing, honestly, it's going to be a lot of questions until we get to Saturday, and even then there may be more questions.
Yeah, I think today was a case of Freeze. I don't think he was being too knee-jerk. I don't think he was jumping to any crazy conclusions, but at the same time, he did not make excuses.
For
Peyton's performance.
You're open to the possibility, and right now, that's it. That's a big step from where we were last week.
I want to touch on something just real quickly about somebody we've been monitoring a little bit. Keontae Scott at cornerback didn't have a great game. Freeze said he's still kind of nursing that hamstring injury. Didn't see him play very much in the second half. Maybe it was a case of injury, but I thought Antonio Kite did a good job of coming in. He got burned on that early touchdown. I don't know how much we're going to see it this week, Jason, in terms of a challenge for that young secondary, but they responded in a good way. I think the defense feels like, we've been talking so much about the offense and their struggles. Defense, for as discouraging overall as a performance and a loss Saturday was, I think the defense feels a pretty good spot after 2 games.
Yeah, I think the thing that to watch for me Saturday is going to be J.C. Hart, Jay Crawford, Amon Langanis. I think those are guys to watch for because they've got to get those young guys some meaningful reps with the lack of depth and lack of experience at corner, especially if Keontae's a guy that moves back inside some. we got to see those guys more. We didn't see J.C. Hart at all Saturday.
No,
And so you got to get those guys in some meaningful reps and get them prepared because they're going to be needed. And so I think we'll see more of those guys on Saturday.
Looking forward to it. Another 6:30 game back in a night game in Jordan-Hare for Game 3 of this 5-game homestand to open the season. As Jason said, it'll be a little bit more intriguing than maybe we thought a couple weeks ago. Auburn against New Mexico. For Jason Caldwell, Nathan King, thank you guys so much for joining us here on the Auburn Undercover podcast and the YouTube channel. We'll talk to y'all soon.